Go.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another OpenShift Commons briefing. And as we like to do on Fridays, do transformational talks. And our hashtag is Transformation Friday. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We did a pre-Kubecon what to expect and, sort of a roadmap thing prior to Kubecon North America. And if you don't know Kubecon, it's the Cloud Native Foundation seminal tri-yearly event. They have one in Europe, North America, and APAC. And this 2 weeks ago, there was an amazing one that was done here in North America. And a lot of us attended. A few of us had to speak, which was kind of done with trepidation on my part. But we're going to talk today a little bit about that event, share some of our favorite talks, and because there were so many. And let's see if I can advance my slides here. I do here. Oops, slide 4. I'm loving slide. And there were 22,000 people who registered for this event, and it was huge. The final numbers haven't come out of the people who registered, and but it was an amazing event, and there were a lot of great connections that we got to make, and they had some amazing tools that we'll talk about that helped make it a little bit more interactive, and we were just really thrilled. And let me just see if my slides are going to work at all today. So I'm rendering slowly here, but I'll start again here too. I have coerced some of my colleagues from Red Hat, Karina Angel, Amy Merrick, Diane Fedema may join us a little bit late, Sophie Watson, and the esteemable Jen Madria, who runs our events for us and makes sure that we all show up on time and contribute to these kinds of events. And so she's sort of one of the masters of ceremonies for us for all things KubeCon and community event-wise. So we're really thrilled that everybody's taking the time here for us. And there is, if you haven't seen it, Torsten Vold, who I have never met, did a great blog post that I recommend everybody take a look at, because they managed to encompass all of the aspects of that were covered in the KubeCon schedule itself. And he did the talk was 5 charts about KubeCon, and it was really kind of interesting, but it was also interesting in, if you look at the bubble diagram on the side, there were talks about everything. And then there were still things that didn't get covered. So like a lot of the Sandbox CNCF projects didn't have specific hallway tracks or sessions there, because there are now 42 of them. So that would be kind of crazy to try and add 42 more sessions to this amazing conference as it is. And he even threw in one chart, which I thought was my favorite. He compared what Red Hat, Cisco, and VMware were talking, and came up with this wonderful chart in which he said very boringly, all we talk about is Kubernetes. And I don't think that's quite true. And I think today you'll see a few other suggestions here. And as I said, 22,000 people registering for this thing. I think their goal was to get 20,000 to register. And to keep 20,000 people engaged and connected and make them connect and keep them happy is no small feat. And so kudos to the whole events team at CNCF for making this happen. They really did an awesome job. And they also, and not only did they do an awesome job on KubeCon, but they did some huge other smaller events around some of the graduated projects and other topics that brought together even more people on day 0. There were a lot of other CNCF hosted things. We co-located an OpenShift Commons gathering on day 0 as well. AWS had a community day on day 1. There was just so much content coming at you over that week. It was overwhelming. And now I'm just going to put in this one little shout out to the folks here who are online, because I know everybody only watches the first 10 minutes of every talk that we give or whatever it is. But if you're planning ahead and you want to be one of those people who gets their talk accepted for the next CNCF KubeCon event, the deadline is December 13th. So start writing your abstracts and tweaking it and getting folks on board to review it, and hopefully we'll see you at the next Kubecon event. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and show off some of the faces of these wonderful people who are here with me today. And I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. Is Amy Merrick, are you? Yep, you're there. I can see your face.
Yep.
Amy,
hi all. My name is Amy Marish. I'm a Principal Technical Marketing Manager here at Red Hat. I'm mainly an OpenStack person. So I talk about OpenStack things and how OpenStack and Kubernetes interrelate in the two communities, because I do have a more community side. Yeah.
Cool. And then I see Karina Angel, and I'm going in the order that they appear on the Brady Bunch grid for me. So Karina, how about if you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Karina Angel. I'm a product manager in the OpenShift product management team. Thanks, Diane.
Then I see Jen is there.
Hey everyone, I'm Jen Madriaga. I'm a global marketing manager on the events team, and as Diane said earlier, I manage all the community events at Red Hat.
And then there's Sophie.
Hi everybody, I'm Sophie Watson. I'm a data scientist here at Red Hat. So I approach Kubernetes from the kind of angle of how can this make our data scientists' lives easier without them having to become Kubernetes experts.
Perfect. So there was a ton of content that was thrown at us from KubeCon. And I kind of think of it as, I don't know how you cook spaghetti, but when I know spaghetti is done is when something sticks. When I throw the noodle and the noodle sticks to the wall, that's my test. And you don't want to see the back wall on my kitchen. But I do clean it up once in a while. But I'm wondering, of all of the talks, and maybe Sophie, I may put you on the spot first. Well, actually, maybe I'll back up a bit. How much of KubeCon did you actually watch while it was airing? Broadcasting. Did you watch any of it live?
I watched one talk live, and that was my talk. So I think that doesn't count. That might even count negatively. So no, I've got a bit of virtual conference fatigue, but I have caught up afterwards, and it's been nice being able to see what people have said on blogs, and people have like pulled out, hey, this was a really good talk, you should go and check that out. I've liked that aspect of the experience.
How about you, Karina? How much of it did you actually watch live?
So the first day I did watch several live, and then as the day went on, I watched maybe the first 10 minutes, and then as the conference went on, it was a bit, 5 minutes here and there. And then, like Sophie said, I've really enjoyed being able to watch it asynchronously, and then, really read through them and see which ones, made a big impact, so that, I could use my time wisely as well.
Yeah. How about you, Amy? Did you watch? I know you did participate in a number of other things at the event. Did you watch much of it live?
I didn't watch any of the sessions. I did participate in like the naming working group and the Empower session. So the more interactive things, because, that's what we miss about going to the conferences, is that face-to-face time and the ability to interact with other people. So I tend to spend my time doing that. Like Sophie, if I'm not talking, and therefore there to answer questions, I don't tend to go to the videoed sessions because you can see them whenever you want.
Yeah.
So my priority is on those things that are interactive.
Sorry, Amy. How did you find the interactive stuff? What's the vibe like? And how does it compare to, the before times when you could sit in a room with other humans?
You do as the best as you can. Even just comparing to OpenStack Summit and the PTG, which were a couple weeks ago, you're doing things like breakout rooms and Zooms where other people are on video as well. So the whole group is together. So it's similar enough that you are all in one place, but like doing a workshop is hard because normally I would walk around the room helping people, and I don't have that ability, and you don't have the faces necessarily to know if somebody's with you or whether they're having problems. So there is those issues, but for more of the social or non-workshop type interactions, we're doing the best we can. And I think we're succeeding as best as we can.
How about you, Jen? Did you get to any sessions other than, I know you were responsible for the Red Hat booth and our presence there at the event. Did they let you out of the virtual booth at all?
Not too much, but I did make time to go see your keynote, Diane, and the accompanying keynote. Yeah, that was great. But yeah, we had a lot going on during KubeCon. Not just, we had the chat and the booth, but then we had the accompanying Slack channel. Then we had the OpenShift.tv office hours going on. I did pop in to most of the office hours, and I was on Slack and on the Intrado chat pretty constantly. And I was pretty happy to see that we had a really high degree of engagement there. So like others, I didn't watch any of the sessions live, but I was also doing a bunch of other stuff related to our other presence at KubeCon.
Yeah.
But I was pretty happy overall.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the keynote. I always dread having to do something in 5 minutes because, like, as most people who know me know, I'm rather verbose. So trying to encapsulate that, I have a much greater respect now for people who have done those 5-minute keynotes in the past. I've always been so impressed when we're there in person and we do it and someone stands up there on stage and does it live and has, this full on thing. And then to do the 5-minute keynote on the rise of the end user and have it pre-recorded 4 weeks prior and then have to show up in the back room, dressing room, hallway on the day of the event. It was a bizarre experience, because you think of all the things you should have said in those 5 minutes. And then you're there and there was Q&A in Slack, but there's no Q&A for the keynote speakers as we were on, but we were all in the backstage together. So that was like kind of this disconcerting, wonderful thing. The one interactive thing that it did work from me that I did attend because I was part of it was the OKD working group Birds of a Feather, which you had to pre-register for and go to, and it was actually quite fun to do that, because we normally, the working group as a group, there's about 300 people in it, and there's about 20-25 diehards who show up for the working group meetings. But if you don't know OKD, it is the community distribution of OpenShift. It is a community distribution of Kubernetes plus all of the other things that go into OpenShift, and it runs on Fedora CoreOS. And so it's just really hitting its stride now in its GA release. It's 4.6 just came out the door, and we were able to announce that at KubeCon and do a small demo in the BOF on the code ready container for 4.5, and now 4.6 is out, so the code ready containers in it. And it was interesting to do that because OpenShift is a Red Hat product and OKD is probably perceived as another Red Hat product, but to bring a Kubernetes distribution there and have other people come from the Kubernetes community to talk about this distribution, and I thought it worked for us. It was quite interesting to get people like not from that 300 group of working group folks, and so in terms of building some awareness of it as a distribution and having people ask pointed and good questions and give us feedback and tell us what else they wanted. I thought it was a really great place to leverage that kind of interaction. And so for that one, which happened on Friday, I was present. And unfortunately, the BOFs were not recorded. I don't know if Amy, some of the things that you did that were interactive, if they were actually recorded.
I know the Empower Us wasn't. There is a chance that the naming working group stuff was,
Yeah.
and those type sessions. But yeah, I know the Empower Us wasn't,
Yeah.
especially when you break up into separate little Zoom rooms. I mean, I know those conversations definitely weren't. So
Yes, a lot of the interactive stuff was quite wasn't recorded. I think it was part of the, some of the issues with the platform and I think it was more privacy stuff. So and I was hoping, I scheduled this session on December 4th. Is where we are now if you're watching this recorded. Hoping that all of the sessions would be out on YouTube. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get turned on either later today or on Monday. So they're not live yet. So one of the things, like, I did not get a chance to see more than the day one keynotes. I watched all of those. And there were some amazing ones. Priyanka is an amazing speaker, did a great tribute to Dan Cohen, who passed, and that was pretty awesome. And inspiring. And there was a woman who came from Apple who gave a really great keynote speak as well about things that are going there. And so I got to see most of day one, but the rest of the week I really didn't get a chance to do that. And so I'm the kind of person who likes to digest stuff afterwards and create playlists and watch them. So what I was hoping today was to ask you guys, which ones do you recommend that we watch and add to our playlist? And then I will create from this conversation a playlist of recommendations from our audience. So if your audience has some, I can see Waleed is recommending the keynote panel with Duffy, Ian, Roy, McEwen, Brad, was his #1 talk. If you can, Waleed, if you grab the title from the Kubecon schedule and type it into the chat, I will add that in. And he's also recommending a Justin Garrison talk that made him the Steve Spielberg of cloud native. Now that, I think, is a high order. So I'll definitely have to look up that one as well. So maybe I'll put Sophie on the spot to start with as the resident data scientist on this conversation. First of all, what talk did you give? So people know what the talk was. And then which one would you be watching now in hindsight?
Yeah, of course. So the talk that I gave was a collaboration with William Benton from NVIDIA, and it was talking about day 2 problems and beyond with machine learning systems. So I think there's, it's kind of universally agreed now that Kubernetes is the platform to be building your machine learning systems on and deploying them on, and there's lots of tools out there to help you to do that as a data scientist without having to really dig down into the infrastructure and become that Kubernetes expert. But once you've got your system up and running, these machine learning systems are arguably so much more complicated than a normal application because there's just so many fun and exciting ways in which they can break. So Will and I talked about different techniques and methods that you can apply to your system once it's up and running, so that you can monitor it and identify these issues. And we also talked about some gotchas and some bits and bobs that could bite you and probably will at some point, so that you know about them beforehand. So kind of keeping on that theme, the talks that I have caught up with are those around ML ops. So this ML ops notion is, perhaps you're familiar with DevOps and DevOps practices for software engineering that really, benefit this continuous testing and integration and making sure that your system is robust. There's been a lot of work done lately to try and get those best practices into machine learning workloads. So kind of moving away from this idea that a data scientist does some work in a notebook and then throws it over the wall to an application developer who recreates that work and it takes months to get anything into production, into this kind of more controlled, more robust system where the data scientists are using Git and using, source control and using continuous integration and continuous deployment and testing in order to ensure that these systems are much more robust, much less ad hoc and one-off. And that's kind of a tricky task because data scientists aren't computer scientists. It's rare that we have that computer science background, and if you have somebody in your company that does have that computer science and machine learning background, then I think cling on to them and appreciate how rare they are. So one lovely talk I watched was by David Aronchick from Microsoft, and David talked about this from a security standpoint. So why do we need MLOps practices in order to make our models secure? I think we're seeing this, across a lot of industries. There's concern that your machine learning model isn't actually going to perform in the way you want it to, so the model might lie, or that an attacker could take over that model, perhaps using adversarial attacks, or that you can uncover some hidden data from that model about the people that it was trained on. So there's kind of information leak from the model. And so David talked about how using pipeline tools that perhaps software engineers are familiar with, something like Tekton and OpenShift pipelines would be a great example here, to kind of make sure that you've got a much better understanding of how the pieces of your system are fitting together. And if something has been exposed, because at some point it will, you are going to get your system hacked, then you know how to react, you know what's been exposed, and you know how to quickly update and make changes to that system to make it more robust. And it's not just from a security standpoint, continuously upgrading aspects of your system, these ecosystems in the Kubernetes world, especially with the Kubeflow project, the Open Data Hub, and all of the data science work that we have going on, is really quite fast moving. There's new tools coming out all the time and a lot of innovation. So to be able to use those pipelines and then change things in there is a really sensible way to go. So watch David's talk for an accessible introduction to how to piece these things together. Before I pass the mic, there's one more talk I want to tell you about, and that is a fabulous talk that I watched by Kevin De La Rosa at Snapchat. So perhaps you're familiar with Snapchat. It has lots of machine learning in there to augment photos, apply filters, and kind of lots of interactive and really fun stuff that's using machine learning. And so he talked about how he'd actually got his system running using these machine learning ML ops practices. So how do you take the things that Will and I talked about in our talk and the tools and techniques that David talked about and actually use them in practice on a real application? So with that, I'm going to yield the mic.
So that actually, the Snapchat one is great because, and all of those are great. I'm going to be hosting an ML Ops, AI Ops, OpenShift Commons gathering at the end of January. So they're, all of those. And David, I know well from both his days at Google and doing stuff with Kubeflow, and he's an awesome talker. And he reminded me that I should ask him to come to that and give a talk as well. So thanks. But Snapchat represents end users as well. And one of the things that I thought there was a bit of a shortage of, and I think a bit of it has to do with virtual burnout as well, were end user case studies. So I will definitely go dig out the Snapchat one and watch that. That's a great recommendation, because I think we as vendors and other folks are so covetous of getting feedback and customers and end users to tell us, how they're using our stuff, that I really like to go to end user talks. And I kind of found this schedule was good in that it was heavy on technical content and updates on projects and things like that, but a little light on the end user side. So that'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time. If we're burning our end users out by asking them to talk too much. So with that, yeah, I think there's a little bit of that going on. Karina, can I tap you next to share which ones you thought were definitely must see, or the ones you're planning on viewing now when they come out on YouTube?
First, I want to point out that I always love hearing Sophie talk. I think she can make anybody excited about MLOps. Seriously, I mean, it's just awesome. So now I have to go back, and I hate to say that I didn't watch your talk, Sophie, so now I'm going to go watch it.
That's okay. Thanks, Karina.
And of course, you know, Will, we all love Will. I mean, so yeah, definitely want to see that. You've pointed out some of the keynotes. So I did spend a lot of my time in the application development tracks and the CI/CD, and of course the GitOps, and things like that. And I loved watching the maintainer track because these are all the people that are really passionate, right? Why would they be a maintainer if they're not passionate about what they're doing? So I loved watching that track, especially the Argo CD and the Helm. But my favorite keynote, other than Diane's, of course, because I love the rise of the end users, was Liz Rice's keynote, right? Talking about predictions. So that's on day 3. And now my cat's saying hi. So on day 3 of the keynote, so she called out 5 predictions. So the chaos engineering, the service mesh, right? Kubernetes at the edge. So those are the 2 that are really, you know, were really interesting. Obviously, Red Hat's putting a lot of effort and innovation into Kubernetes at the edge. And service mesh, I mean, I know Redbeard probably has a lot of opinions about that talk too. But she also mentioned that they're going to be changing how a lot of the projects that are being incubated and that are sandboxed, kind of how that's going so that there's more of an impact. And I'd love to hear follow-ons to that, because for me, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, okay, so does that mean that it lessens the impact of projects that have already graduated, because now the requirements are going to be stricter for, you know, sandbox and incubating? So I'm concerned about that. So that's one thing. Does that mean the projects that got out the door first are just the ones that people got used to and now they're popular, now they have a name? And so, you know, how's that going to be for the end users and that whole rise of the end users, right? If they're being limited.
I think that's an interesting conundrum. And, you know, I know Amy's coming from OpenStack world and some of the big tent issues we had with, or was described as big tent issues of trying to embrace and extend the ecosystem and balancing all that out. And Liz Rice and the TOC from CNCF do a damn fine job, I have to say, trying to manage all of those processes. But frankly, the other day, I think I counted 42 things in the sandbox for the CNCF projects. And as someone who does community development, that is worrisome in terms of our bandwidth and spreading resources thin from a community perspective. But also inspiring because there is just so much innovation going on out there. And what's Stephen's name from Red Monk? Stephen O'Grady. I think he wrote the book, The New Kingmakers Are the Developers, and I agree with that. But I think CNCF has and it tries doggedly to not be kingmakers. But in some ways, it is a de facto king-making organization. Maybe queen-making would be a little bit more gender, or nothing. It's not gender fluid, whatever. I can't think of that. But anyways, that it's really hard. I mean, I think I said this at the beginning, is that most of the sandbox folks, you had to hunt and peck through the schedule to, if you're someone like me that's trying to keep up on everything that's going on, from Wayfair donating Tremor to Metal Cubed and all of these things, to try and find them in the tracks, it was really a difficult task. And a lot of them didn't get the publicity that I had hoped for, because at Kubecon in the hallway, I hunt down those people and say, okay, give me the elevator pitch about, what you're doing and what you need and how it intersects with Kubernetes and OpenShift and what we're doing over here at Red Hat. So that's a tough ask. And I don't, we're still all, and Liz is doing a great job leading all of that work. So that I think is kind of, it is what it is. Innovation happens all over the place. I think I have one slide that says there are in 2019 there were 96 million repos in GitHub. And if you haven't seen, the Octoverse report just came out yesterday from GitHub, and that it's mind-boggling how much is out there and how it connects with everything. So that is one of the things I use Kubecon for, is to try and connect with those people, and then it's much easier to do in person. So Amy, I'm gonna, if that's all your recommendations, Karina, am I cutting you off at the pass?
I'll send you the list so you can
Okay.
add it to the playlist.
I'll add it to the list. I'm going to annotate the thing and create a list with it. So please do. Here. So Amy, I know you did a few of the interactive things. Were there any OpenStack things at KubeCon, CNCF?
No, I mean, I know that we normally meet up with a working group for a SIG, but at the same time, I didn't find it on the schedule.
Yeah.
Finding the SIGs and the working groups, because I was going to go to the Kubernetes doc SIG, couldn't find it on the schedule. So having the sched wasn't exactly the easiest way to find things. And then one thing I ran into was my time zone on the sched was different, even though it should have been correct. So I was arriving at a lot of stuff late.
So that said, were there other talks that you would have recommended, or you're going to know that you're going to watch coming up now?
I wanted to really watch the Dan Cole Memorial Tribute, and I did not get a chance. He was a great guy. So that was something I had wanted to go to, but then didn't make it there, knowing that I could watch it again later. And there was one naming working group session that I'm hoping, it was a talk on documentation that I'm hoping to get to see again. And then there was one other, but I don't remember who was giving it. But again, it was just, off chance of finding it in the schedule and going, that looks a little interesting. I'll put it on my schedule, and didn't make it to it.
I think that's a lot of and this is the problem with virtual versus in person, is you get hallway recommendations, from people. Like you see a huge crowd gathering around a door, and you don't have any sort of visual. So maybe if there's a way we can see, there's 100 people in that session, or 2,000 people in this session, or whatever. That's it. Sometimes when I'm walking through the hallway at an in-person event, that's kind of how I choose. It's like, or other times is there a chair in that room? And can I sit down because my feet are tired from walking this convention center?
Yeah, let me just peek in this door and see what's going on here. Oh, well, this sounds interesting. I'll stay. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was, even when you found something you wanted to go to in the sched, there wasn't necessarily a link. So most of the things I did were RSVP because they were interactive and they were off platform. So I then got a link to know where the session was to attend it. Whereas sched works really well in person because it tells you what room to go to.
Yeah.
The linkage. So I think those were some issues that I think are going to cause people to go and watch the replays versus them attending it in person.
Yeah. So Jen, you're abnormally quiet. You are never this quiet.
It's been kind of a long week and a long 2020, if I'm honest.
Yeah, you're on it. And I know you've talked before at KubeCons. I've seen you on stage at different times doing so. Were there any that you're going to go back and watch? Because I know you were in the booth, or any that were ones that you'd recommend?
Well, I'm going to go check out Sophie's recommendations, and then I'm going to go look at the playlist. To be honest, I am snowed under with content with events I have to see from the entire fall.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is now I'm asking for recommendations because I think, like everyone else, I have a lot of virtual fatigue going on, but there's a lot of content that I'm wanting to look at and assimilate for the coming year. Because one of the things that I do in my role is to identify trends and things of interest that I can also advise potential speakers on topics that might be compelling in the coming year. So I definitely need to do that. So I've got some homework to do probably over the holidays. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I actually want to take a look at the keynotes a little bit more because I did hear from some folks that it seemed like the keynotes were more marketing oriented in general. And that's a trend that I kind of want to take note of. I know, at least from my conversations with the CNCF team, is that they're trying to avoid that. But since people are making that commentary, I want to actually just take another look at it and give that feedback if that's the case. I think I'm just going to brag on Red Hat a little bit. I think we do a really great job with our keynote content. Like, I don't think we are guilty of kind of this kind of marketing speak. I think we try to be really relevant to the community and to a technical audience. But I know sometimes from other organizations aren't as, I guess, vigilant about making sure that kind of messaging is avoided in a community space. Because I always feel very, very strongly that even if it's just a 5-minute keynote like the one you delivered, that it needs to be very relevant to the audience. And so, one of the things that I'm always looking to is to make sure that we're speaking to our audience appropriately. So
I think that it's interesting. I think we make a habit with our keynotes to promote something, either a new project, or last year was OCI, Sally O'Malley and Urvashi,
Monani, yeah.
Madani? Thank you.
Yep.
I kill everybody's name, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
and then Urvashi also did the cryo. She did a keynote on cryo previously.
Yeah.
And so, which was independent of our sponsored keynote. But I think it's really notable that we definitely are noted for our leadership in the community space. And so I'm really, really proud of that, that we're always featuring stuff related to the community space. And I think we also had a keynote dedicated to operators at one point.
Yeah, Rob Sumsky
did that's right, Rob did that.
One year, Clayton went up and did one that was, some aspect of, the roadmap for Kubernetes.
Yes.
And something like that, and people really like that. And I think that's, in keynotes, there's two sides to keynotes, and I think Waleed, who was also in chatting there, is a lot of it was people stories. So I don't think it was actually marketing. Because I know in our internal conversation recap that we had as a team, I don't think it was marketing needs that people I think there were a lot of people stories and less technical talks or new projects that got showcased on the stage. And I think that's something I would love to have seen Metal Cubed, for example, a conversation about Kubernetes on bare metal,
Yeah.
Because I think that's a trend that's coming. We're seeing that a lot of people in Kubernetes on the edge. I know there's a couple of like we did in OpenShift Commons on the gathering. It was Stephanie Kiras,
Yep.
who's from Red Hat, did an awesome talk on. I think the title of it was Better Together,
with RHEL.
OpenShift and RHEL, and talking about RHEL Core OS and the synergies between and the necessities for keeping those connecting Kubernetes and the operating system that it's being deployed on. And she did a great keynote and kept it technical but visionary and roadmap enough. And that I couldn't say enough about how much I love listening to her weave a good story. And I'll post that one. And Karina, you did a talk that I really liked on the OpenShift Commons gathering. It was one of the on-demand talks with Andre Toast. So that about operators and creating custom operators. So there's this kind of interplay of making it feel like a community, so we feel engaged and we see ourselves on stage and doing that kind of good work and being inclusive, and also making sure that the content is technical enough to teach us something. You know, sometimes we're teaching about ourselves, and sometimes we're teaching about the technology. So I think that's really it. And I can see, if you can tell, the sun has come out where I am. And I'm going to pause for a minute. And maybe, Karina, other things around the work that you're doing. I know there were a lot of IBM folks. Yeah, I'm a little blinded by the light at the moment. Thanks for that comment in there. That other things, maybe any of the IBM stuff that you were working with. I know you work closely with the Cloud Paks folks as well.
You mean as far as, you know,
Talks?
Things that talks that they? Well,
I didn't see any that I didn't see any. I didn't get to. I did see some on the schedule, but I didn't really go to see anything in person.
Truthfully, I did not look for the IBM Talks. I know I know this is recorded, and I'm sorry, everybody. I was looking for the more the technology and not specifically, you know, IBM. I know there's IBM people that, you know, we know that are actively engaged in different communities. So, but yeah.
I'll have to do a search through the schedule to see, because I think that's the interesting dynamic with Red Hat being acquired by IBM. I think a lot of people think, you know, oh, they're now our corporate masters or something. It's like, no, they're, you know, in a lot of ways, they're just another vendor out there that we do collaborate with, just like all the other ones. And there were some great talks by VMware. You know, I'm always amazed at like the diversity of the vendors and how easily we all tend to collaborate with each other. And that you'll see a lot of panels where, you know, it obviously is we're competing in the product space, but on the open source side, we're just sitting there trying to make the projects work and run smoothly and get the roadmaps out there. So that's been an interesting thing.
So, and that's why I really loved collaborating with Andre on that talk, because it wasn't a product pitch, right? We were just talking about, so I didn't think about it as an IBM Red Hat talk. We were just talking about how would you know, create your custom catalogs and, you know, use your bundles and everything. So anyway, that's what I love about the collaboration and all the community work.
So thinking about it, we're coming towards the end of this conversation. And the CFP is open for the next one, and there'll be another one after that and after that. So don't ever feel bad if your talk doesn't get accepted. Talk to one of us and we'll find a stage for you to get it out on, whether it's Commons or Kubecon or someplace. But if there was something that you would have liked to have had a talk on, and you know, I keep harping on, I would like to see a forum somehow built for all the new Sandbox stuff. And I know part of the ethos with the Sandbox is not to market them, you know, not to make a kingmaker and make the, you know, but just give them the space. But it's also, you know, I think for me, what I would have liked to have seen is even just a series of lightning talks for all of the Sandbox folks, or you know, their own Slack channel, you know, KubeCon conference Sandboxers, you know, something like that, because that, you know, that is, I think, really one of the key things that I personally go to KubeCon for, is to see the new trends and what's coming. So that's kind of it.
I'd love to see that for each of them, incubating, you know, graduate. I mean, each one of them. I'd love to see a lightning talk and the trends for, you know.
And lightning talks seem like perhaps the way to go. Now that we all have meeting fatigue and Zoom fatigue, and you know, there are other streaming platforms out there. So that was not a product pitch, but yeah, the fact that we can, I feel like I could sit down and gain a lot from a quick 5-minute talk, whereas the notion that the only time I used to sit and catch up on long talks was on planes on the way to conferences. So that's it's taken 2 birds out with the 1 stone there. But sorry, Jen, go on.
No, I was just going to say that just from a logistical standpoint, we're finding that research related to virtual events is that people will digest the content much better if it's in shorter bites. And one of the things that we're also realizing, like in the virtual booth, we used to like kind of kitchen sink all this content and realize that we have to really, really refine things in terms of people's attention spans. So you're absolutely right. Like the 5-minute version is actually, I think, the wave for the coming months, because people are inundated by so much content that if you want to introduce something fresh and new, you need to really do it in a really, really short amount of time, and then give people the opportunity to follow up on their own time on any kind of deep dive that they might want to do on that content. So I was just going to just echo what you said, that if you feel it personally, the research has already shown that that's definitely the case in terms of like presenting the new content in a very, very short format.
There's a great title for a Canadian comedy show. I'm up here in Canada, and it's called "This Hour Has 22 Minutes," and or this half hour. I think it's this hour. But once you take all the commercials out of a TV show up here in Canada, it is actually only 22 minutes of content. And I've been watching the stats on even the YouTube watching of the OpenShift Commons briefings and the stuff that we live stream, and it's basically around 22 minutes. People will watch 22 minutes of anything. So we could say anything right now because this is the end, towards the end of the talk. And, I could talk about, the fact that I don't have a dog right now and it's bothering me and I really need a puppy. And no one would notice that. Or I could embed a coupon for Starbucks and, oh, your grandmother's still watching. Great, Sophie. Good. And yeah, I'll take your dog. But not your noisy cat, Karina. So I think that's really an interesting conundrum, is like, if you want to do a technical deep dive and you can't do a technical deep dive in 5 minutes or less, I'll take the cat's not my thing. No, keep throwing that cat up in the window. You try and give away that cat. Yeah. Okay. Waleed, where are you based though? Are you in Saudi Arabia? Can she ship a cat to Saudi? Yeah. I don't think we could get it through customs for you in time. But I think that we really have to figure out not only how do we keep people's attention, and I used to think it was by getting people to come was writing the best title for my talk, like The Rise of the End Users, or something that would catch people's attention as they went down through the schedule. And I don't think that's enough. Clearly, it's not enough. And clearly, I'm not really totally comfortable with just 5 minutes. Those trendy titles make you cringe. I spend copious amounts of time, Sophie, coming up with those crazy titles. So, so anyways, so I think that's one of the things. And the other thing, and Amy, you touched on it, was the sessions that were interactive. And I know in the booth, one of the results that we said of the things that people asked the most questions about were certifications. And that got me thinking about how do we combine these content heavy things where we're pushing content out with maybe offering certifications, like online tests during the event itself. So I think the interactivity component is in trying to figure out the best way to master online courses and do that in a way that's pulling people in as opposed to pushing all this content out. That's been mine. So I know also, Amy, you said you went to some of the social things.
I did, because I miss people. So I went to the trivia nights, the Disney and the MCU nights. And it was really great because you got matched up with people you didn't know. And while you were working on the questions, you went off to your own Zoom room. A lot of people had their families participating. So it was a great way to interact with other people, for your family to interact with the conference. The Linux Foundation is always really great about having events for the families that come, and like daycare for the kids and stuff like that. So this kind of carried over to allowing that. Everything was kid friendly for those events. I ran into that at least the first night, again going to the wrong time, so I hit it at the end, but I was also in the booth, our booth, when it started. So then I went over to the to the Disney night, but I knew for the Marvel night, exactly what time to get there. And, it was a lot of fun. And I think we need to do more of those events. So even, just within our different communities, have, a fun night while we're all in lockdown, because we can't get together. We can't do those events at conferences.
Yeah, I think
So,
a friend of mine hosted for VMware, one of the big VMware, and invited me to a virtual Japanese whiskey tasting, which was kind of torture because they had this expert from Tokyo who runs these programs, and she hired him, and he was explaining this and the history of Japanese whiskey, and it was fabulous. And it was, I think there were about 10 to 15 women. So the smaller, more intimate things too are also, I think Michael Waite hosted some sort of beer and cocktails thing on day 1 or day 0 as well for Red Hat partners. And so the littler and the more social aspects are things that that really I've connected with at other conferences. How about the rest of you? What were the any interactive things that you've done recently that you thought worked? Silence. Everybody's burnt out on virtual.
Yeah, I think it's just so tough every interaction we have now is virtual, right? Whether you're talking to your family or you're at work or you're, hanging out with your friends, it's all virtual. So
yeah, I think it's going to be it's tough. I think I found the most connectivity for KubeCon in the Slack channels. No offense to the Red Hat booth. It was good, and there were lots of people there, and there were some amazing interactive games that got set up, and some swag was given. So that was cool. But I found that when I was in the CNCF Slack, not the Kubernetes Slack, but the CNCF had set up a nice structure for each of the sessions and for speakers, back rooms and stuff like that. That's where I ended up actually connecting with people. That was the true hallway back room for KubeCon itself. And we did a bit of stuff. We live streamed the OpenShift Commons Day on OpenShift TV, and then we hosted those office hours, and that was pretty interactive, and that came out pretty cool. And I'll add some links to those. But even the links to some of the interactive stuff, even you don't get the vibe. It was, like Waleed and the other folks who were in chattering away. You didn't, after the event was over, they erased or they shut down all of the Slack channels that were conference specific. So you lost the history thread. So they were archived, yes. So I couldn't, and you can't get back to them. I don't think you can get back to them now. But that is one thing I would have kept those around a bit longer so that those folks that I didn't take their details from, I could find and track them down again. So that was kind of there. So
I wanted to go back through because in the sessions, if you're watching it, the recording and not live, and you go back and they're like, oh, there's great conversation going on in the Slack channel, and then you go over and it's already been archived. You're like, no, So anyway.
Yeah, I think that was the one thing that I wish they kept it around a little bit longer. And that's I think the one ask that I'll give back to the CNCF is that rather than archive it, give me more than 2 weeks to go find those people that I talked with. I talked with a wonderful gentleman from Deutsche Telekom for a long time in the background, and and other platforms other than Slack. Didn't Slack just get bought by Salesforce?
Yep, yesterday.
Yeah, geez, I can't keep up with this stuff. Well, let's hope it doesn't get totally integrated into Salesforce.com and everybody becomes a customer. But I bet that's happening in the background somewhere. Someone's thinking about that. Hopefully they'll keep it like Microsoft did with GitHub and still semi-independent there.
It's going to be okay, Diane.
It's going to be okay. All right.
You seem really concerned about this. But
I'm very concerned about that. I live and breathe. I lived and breathe in IRC prior to Slack, and now I've been convinced that Slack is the end all and be all of everything. And I know there's a lot of people, because you don't watch past 22 minutes, no one's going to hear that and troll me for that. But I think that's kind of the interesting thing. So we only have 4 minutes left. So any last words from anyone about what you'd like to see in the next KubeCon, or recommend anything else you'd like to add in?
I mean, from my side, I'd like to see more interactive things, because I think that will get more people. I really did like the discussion we were having of the lightning talks for the new projects, or even for existing projects. That would give people a short opportunity to find out about a project to get involved with. And one thing I wasn't able to find that I was looking for was some of the onboarding sessions for the different projects. Because as we've mentioned, it was an opportunity to have people who wouldn't normally attend Kubecon. This was a great opportunity to get people onboarded, and I don't think they took advantage of it.
Yeah, they usually do that with the Contributor Summit. And they have, and Josh Burkus and Paris Pittman and Stephen Augustus and other folks do a great job with that. But I didn't get to any of those, so I'll have to look through the schedule to see if there were any newbie sessions and add them into the playlist and flag those, because I didn't do that. But yeah, I think one of the things is there's just so much content that it's just almost unfathomable that we can actually do it live. And very few people, I think, took the full day off or the full 3 days off from work. So they also tried, and I know I did, try to work. Like you think you can be on your other laptop over here typing away and listening to someone's talk, but it just doesn't seem, it's not humanly possible. Unless you're physically, got moved to some place and are given the time to go and explore and learn, it's really hard to drag yourself away from your day job. So I think that's a tough one to do. And on that note, I did see the announcement, and I love American optimists, and I really hope it's true, but we are going to host KubeCon North America next year in Los Angeles in October. And I am so hoping, not only is it because my brother and my nephews live there and I'll get to see them, it'll probably be the first time I get back to the States from Canada, but it will be so wonderful. And my hope is that we do all get to see everybody again in California and explore LA, the Museum of Modern Art there, La Brea Tar Pits. I'm already planning my itinerary of everything else I'm going to do if I get down there and eat some tacos out of a food truck somewhere, I'm sure. And so my mouth is watering, and I'm really hopeful that all of you will stay safe and stay home for the holidays with your loved ones in your little bubbles, so that we can all be there together in October of next year and move this forward. So if you're watching out there and you have a talk that you really think we should have mentioned here, send me a link at Python DJ or at OpenShift Common on Twitter, and I will incorporate that into our playlist. And I'm gonna thank you all for your amazing contributions, and invite you also I created a playlist to binge on for all the OpenShift Common stuff. I'll add that in too. So if you go to YouTube for RH OpenShift, there's a great playlist of everything. Karina, Diane Fedema, who didn't end up being able to join us, there's an OKD talk. There's tons of great talks there as well. But hopefully we'll see you all in LA in October, if not sooner, virtually. So take care all, and thank you for sharing today with me. I really appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having us.